Well, they're getting things kicked off here this week. Last week, when we were talking, you were kind of identifying a little bit of a pattern shift of talking about, can we break away from this dry spell that a good portion of the U.S. was experiencing? Kind of seemed like that over this past week as we got a lot of moisture to areas that were really needing it. Is that expected to continue as we are still identifying a lot of this, impacts of drought that we've been experiencing over the past few months and getting into this winter?
Yeah, drought right now, but before the rains, we got the new drought monitor. So the drought right now is up to 74% of the lower 48. And my first map just kind of shows you going back over, from August 1 till now, just how extensive this particular dry stretch is and how extensive the one is to the south. But we did get rain there over the weekend. But I'm going to show you something, Dawson, just to make this clear. I was worried about something like this happening back in July, right? This triple ridge, one, two, three, just somewhere, where we'd end up stacking a ridge somewhere in the midsection of North America. And that was that northward retreat to the jet stream that allowed, if you look at the surface winds since August 1st, for the Bermuda High to kind of drift east, which is what it did. So this kind of shut down our really good moisture transport. So for many, while this La Nina was building, while we had the what's called the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole going, and the Pacific High sat right here, for many it was just like, when is the moisture going to come back into the midsection of the country? And it finally did this weekend. So what happened was we had a cold front come through that draped itself right here. It connected up with a low pressure system that came out of Texas and went right along that. And the beauty of this system was its speed. It rained at my house in Champaign, Illinois. In fact, I'll zoom in on the Midwest for you here. I mean, it rained right here in the middle part of Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan for like 11 hours, And so it was slow. It didn't all come at once. We didn't have a lot of runoff. It soaked in, and these rains are absolutely incredible. And it's going to be huge for a fall application that we got this moisture because the ground was rock hard and we just didn't have the ability to do any work. Harvest went fast, but that was it. Now, this threw the pause on some harvest. Not everybody was done. Some people were still out there going. But I mean, I'm looking at my yard right now, and we had more than the 1.45. That was in Champaign, near me. I mean, you can't see it. You wouldn't even know it rained. It soaked in so much just right around here. And you can even see that in evidence of the Mississippi River, which is 9 feet below low stage right now. So that water's not gone anywhere. It's stuck in the ground. And but it did do this. It took the soil moisture from 1 week ago, that was a week ago, to looking like this now, right? So this is 1 week ago. Let's get them lined up here to this week. And that is a huge improvement in places. But Dawson, there's still some dry conditions north. There's dry conditions in the Northeast. Now, these are going to improve. These are going to improve. But this is the drought I want to talk about. Texas, Cotton Belt, Southeast, keep that tucked away in the back of your head, okay? Because as we think about where this pattern is going, we have a couple of things going on. There's a little clipper system that's going to go through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday here. We then have several huge systems, including a big one this weekend coming into the Northwest. But there's a little cutoff low that's coming through California and is going to end up here by Friday. And the rainfall around this is going to be really important to see how far to the south it gets, how far to the southwest of that low it gets, and does it ever make it into the southeast. And the reason I'm hammering on all of this is because there is risk of wintertime drought developing in those three corridors. That'll be huge for the 2026 season if it's still there. That's all I'm going to say. But there's going to be some much needed rain in this area. Now they're trying to get the winter wheat planted in Kansas and Oklahoma. This is great. They need every bit of this rain to get that going. And the chances of over an inch are very high in this region. But I'm going to tell you, we need this kind of rainfall probability once every 10 days for the next 7 months. And if we get it and the rain comes through, then this whole narrative I'm going to share with you at the end here in a minute isn't going to come through. Now, if you look, the Pacific is stacked up to send lows through the country. And there's a little cutoff low that's going to show up soon that's going to get into this region. But you know what they've wanted all season was they've wanted something to come out of the Gulf. And do you know that so far in 2025, there's not been a single hurricane at all to form or track through the Gulf of Mexico? Not one, or the Gulf of America, whatever I'm supposed to call it. And so there was some hope that this next little system, which could get the name Melissa, was going to do it. but right now it's got an 80% chance of developing, but most of the models take it into the Caribbean, and then they're split on where it's going to go. Some of them have it dying over in the West Caribbean, some have it going north, but none of them have it getting into the Gulf. So there's not even a system coming out into that area. So what we're left with is this. Our national all-weather hazards map shows wind issues today in the plains. In fact, over the next 10 days, there's the chance of multiple strong wind events in the plains where we could get cumulative gusts of 60 plus miles an hour over that time frame. So we've gone from stagnant and boring now to windy, repeated systems. It's fall. It just happened all of a sudden that the pattern decided to change over to it. And that pattern looks like this, as you mentioned it. Just look at the frequency of these troughs of low pressure finally moving across North America. And what they're going to do is they're going to send systems like the one this weekend going over the Great Lakes. It's a big wind producer, gets into the Northeast. We then watch the low from California go over the Four Corner States by Thursday. That's the one that hits some of the winter wheat country, getting down toward, the Ozarks and then eventually into the lower Mississippi River Valley this weekend. And then look at the monster coming into the Pacific Northwest as I rock back and forth over Saturday and Sunday. I mean, it's on. We're getting systems to come through, and they're going to be able to put down quite a bit of precip. But as we get out there farther, take a look at this week 2 forecast. See how wet this is all looking? That is mostly from this huge storm system developing right here on October 29th into the 30th. That is a big October low. Big time winds. We could get snow wrapping around the backside of it. It's it. That's the thing. Like we're there. We're now just going to have to start talking about snow more often than we have been in the past. Now, when you look out there into the month of November, just have a look here. You can see that the new European model has gone over more aggressive for precipitation. What I want to know, Dawson, is this and this. Do those regions stay drier longer and longer and longer, or does winter ever come through and break those areas out of their drought? That's a big question we're going to have to ask. Now, real quick, temperatures. Even with the cool down behind this weekend's front, these are our month-to-date temperature ranks. It's been very, very warm, but now we're starting to get more seasonal frost outlooks, right? I mean, there was a frost on the rooftops in Champaign this morning. We've got temperatures dipping below freezing, which is common. It's not an issue. I think everybody's done. We're not hearing any issue with this, but this is right on time. The temperatures in the Midwest are gonna be volatile. I mean, just expect them to ride a 20 or 30 degree weekly wave. They're just gonna go up and down and up and down. That's very common for this time of year. But as you look out over the next 2 weeks, I'm very interested in how we finish the month and start November. This could ruin my kids' Halloween. That's why I'm really watching it carefully. Although I don't know if they're going to trick or treat anymore. My daughter's 16, so she probably doesn't care. And my son's in the 8th grade, and I don't know if he's still into it or not, but I'm going to be handing out candy. I just don't want it to be brutally cold for it with the big system that comes through. So Dawson, that's what I've got for the next couple of weeks. It's finally active. There's stuff going. It's happening.
Yeah, the temperature side of thing was the interesting one of we had that huge warm, mild August, September front month or front part of October that it just seems like things could really get down there. And now that it has, it's bringing that more activeness that we're looking at to identify, can we get some wish casting to turn into some reality here for actually bringing in a little bit more precipitation for a lot of these areas? Because yes, we've seen just this long bout of drier weather for much of the U.S. and it seems like, yeah, it took a good chunk out of what we've seen with the deficits here recently too.
Yeah, so let's look back then over those last 45 days and do a global comparison for the next 2 weeks. This is something that kind of slipped off my radar. I didn't realize that a lot of the Russian wheat belt was going drier for the last 2 months. I mean, have you heard a lot of chatter about it on the markets?
The drier weather's been allowing for their harvest, and Russia's always been so unreliable, but a lot of what they've kept saying too is that like the Volga region, some of these regions have been very productive to where they kept raising those estimates. So, even with it turning drier, it really seems like it hasn't really impacted what they've been reporting out of, in terms of the total grain harvest.
Yeah. We got a lot of action going on in parts of China and India for the last 45 days. India is still wet. I'll show you the 2-week forecast in a second. They've been drier in the east down here in Australia, which impacts their winter crops because they're going into spring right now. I think the biggest thing has been just the the slow and erratic start to the monsoon. And if you look out over the next 2 weeks, which is what this looks like, they're still drier there, right? I mean, that's an important thing. And by the way, better rains are coming into the Russian wheat belt after they've, planted some of their winter wheat. I would say this, I got about 80% of their growing area. We're getting about 50% of normal rainfall. But you got to remember, 50% of normal rainfall could still be 30 to 50 millimeters of rain. That's like an inch and a half to 2 inches. And so I think we talked about this last week, but man, in Iowa, if I told you you're only getting 50% of your rains, we could have crop failure. But in Brazil, 50% of the rain is still enough. But I'm just curious what this might do to the slowdown in the harvest. The reality is I'd have to show you maps like this for the next 6 to 10 weeks before we're like, okay, big, big, big problem. It's happening. There's an issue. And the reality is that we're not even in November yet, right? I mean, there's plenty of time for the monsoon to fully get itself established and get going. But like I mentioned, Brazil had this drop off in planting pace, especially Mato Grosso, but they picked up average pace for the last week. That mimics the 5-year average. So they're ahead, but at least they matched their historical pace during that time set. So that's what I got going on for South America and the rest of the world.
Yeah, it seems like I saw a note on Bloomberg this morning too, is that they were able to get those weekend rains again, or these last few days of rains that
Yeah.
kind of helped their progress again. So there, it just still seems like there's a little bit of optimism going on down there that they can still get this crop in and be all right, right?
Well, some of their optimism is also from La Nina. So if you could just paint it with a broad brush, this area tends to do fine during La Nina. We tend to have drought in southern Brazil and we tend to have it in Argentina. Okay, so that's it. And so that's probably why you're not hearing much is because these areas are yet to get into drought. And we've just had a bit of a slow start to the monsoon here. But this La Nina is affecting certainly the North American forecast. I mean, this is the new outlook for November through January in terms of precip and temperatures. And this is the heart of winter. Now, remember, we talked about this last week, but if you just kind of take I-80 as a boundary, we tend to freeze fall's drought into the soil here. But man, you can revive it in the Ohio, Missouri, and Mississippi valleys here. But I'll be honest, what I'm most concerned about is this. And one of our forecast models, Dawson, is doing this by the time we get to March, April, May. Now, why I care is because if I'm just going to, I want to remind you that this is entirely just a skeptical, I'm just spectating. I'm literally just looking and watching and pretending one thing's going to happen. We don't know. But let's say it's right and this is dry by the time we get into March, April, May. If they do not have the delta, their typical late winter, spring, severe weather, heavy rains, and that area ends up dry, that is a major red flag for all the area to the north of it. Your state, my state, and Indiana all included, plus Missouri. You should toss in Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio. The whole area tends to struggle in summer if we do not have spring rain filling in this area. So it's just a point. None of it is real yet. It's just something a model has come up with. And I need you to know about it just because it could become a storyline later. But oftentimes when we think about drought, I kind of feel a bit like a hammer and everything's a nail. I'm gonna go look, I'll find it wherever I want to find it. And it's just something to consider here because I mean, do you realize how close we were to having this drought? If it had been 25 days earlier, we'd be having an entirely different conversation right now. We'd be talking about terrible yields, major problems in the Midwest. So it's always about the timing. And that's why spring is critical to see if the rains return to the Delta. If they don't, we've got a story.
Yeah, and for sure. And with what we're looking at right now for these longer range forecasts, it just seems like a lot of what the government has been trying to do is we're just preparing for La Nina. Is that just going to be what we're going to be looking at until something changes then?
Yeah, I mean, I think this La Nina's got some kick to it. Um, I think it's going to reach a peak early, which
Mhm.
means the second half of winter could look way different from the front half. But the reality is, none of us really know how winter's going to shape up just yet. I mean, we
Right.
have to get fully into December to see, do we have a two-pronged Pacific jet or a one? Is the North Atlantic going to be cold or is it going to be warm? Is it going to be high pressure over the Arctic or not? Is the polar vortex going to disrupt itself? Something going to push into it? All of those subseasonal things are what's most important. But to be honest with you, Dawson, I need this to be wrong. The National Weather Service, through the USDA, has put out their risk through January 31, saying there is drought that is likely going to build or persist here through, when I expect this La Nina to do its thing, meaning that we will be entirely dependent on spring rain at that point to undo a drought if this is right. Whereas if you have a wet winter, you don't have to have the crazy spring rains to ensure that you don't have a problem going into the 2026 growing season.
Yeah, a lot of, far-facing things that we're looking at, but just something to keep an eye on as we're looking towards that next season. It just seems like, yes, there might have been some problems with this year with weather and disease pressures, but overall, it seems like things are turning out okay. So it's again looking to that next crop to see what the factors could be for how and of any problems that could occur.
Yeah, and we just do it because we need perspective. That's all it is. So you don't do anything with this information other than know that we're watching it, and that way when we get into spring and all of a sudden I say, "Hey, look, the drought didn't get cured," you've already had the education as to why that matters, right? So that's the point of talking about it, is so that we are on guard better, not speculating and not, pretending we know stuff we don't know. So I think that's the main idea.
Yeah, we're going to keep piecing a lot of that together as the weeks and months go on, but always appreciate your perspective for this week, Eric, and we'll see you again next week.
All right, sounds good.